Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Talking Sass. And thank you guys so very much for joining me. Before we get started talking about my guest today, let's talk about patreon.com/sassysteffi. Starting at only $2, you're going to get so many great exclusives for the whole month. You're going to get early access to the podcast. You're going to know who my guests are before anybody else. And chances are you're going to get to ask them a question as well. So make sure you go and subscribe to patreon.com/sassysteffi because that's just the beginning. The tiers go up from there with even more and cooler exclusives. So once again, go check out patreon.com/sassysteffi. You can follow me, of course, on Instagram and on Twitter at sassysteffi. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to go and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And also hit that bell notification because you never know when something new might be coming out. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to go and subscribe there as well. And if you don't mind, please do me a favor and go and rate and review Talking Sass. And please give a 5-star rating. Now, on to today's guests. Like I said, very excited for both of them. First, I want to talk about Dan Murphy because he's on every month, as you know, as our monthly pro wrestling history lesson. And in April, his book, The Wrestler's Wrestler, is going to be coming out, and I'm so excited for him. So make sure you guys go and pre-order that on Amazon or wherever you get your books from. Now, on to today's main guest. You have seen her on NXT. You have seen her on AEW, where she instantly became a meme. She is everyone's favorite Aussie. She is Heartbreak Core. And that's So Shazza. This is Shazza McKenzie. Hey Shazza, how's it going?
That's good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I mean, I'm in Canada and I know you're in Australia. They're starting to get back to a little bit of normal, right?
Yeah, we have a reasonably normal life aside from not being able to leave our island. Like, other than that, completely normal. Well, not completely normal, but reasonably normal. We just are trapped inside, but that's okay.
I mean, if I were you, but I'm sure this is kind of overrated to you, but because I've never been to Australia, I'd be like, I'm stuck with all the kangaroos and the koalas and they're so cute. I'd be happy about that.
Yeah, little spoiler, we don't actually ever see kangaroos or koalas like in day-to-day life. Sorry.
Well,
Sorry to break your heart.
You're in Sydney, so I mean, obviously you're in like a major city in Australia. Do you actually, this is like more of a question for me because I love watching Finding Nemo. Is there a 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney, Australia, anywhere in there?
I mean, there might be, but I don't. If it is, I've never visited, but there probably is. Honestly, like we get some weird street names, so it seems likely.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's talk about you and everything that you've been through in your career. But like I was telling you earlier, I listened to a couple of your podcasts to get ready for today and, to have like some more background on Shazza McKenzie. So I was interested when you were young as a kid, you did like a lot of like odds and end, like extracurricular activity things. Like you were a gymnast, you were doing pageants, you were in singing lessons for like most of your childhood. I mean, what didn't you do?
I didn't do a lot of sport.
No, okay.
No, I did. The only sport I ever like really played was basketball. Like I really liked basketball. My dad liked basketball, I think, and like that sort of just like got pushed on me, I guess. I don't know. It was what I had to do. But that was like really the only sport I did. I did a lot of I did a lot of performing. So I always wanted to be a performer. I was always wanting to dance and act and sing and be in front of people and like, but I'm a Leo, so I'm like center of attention all the time. Me. So I think that's what led to me being like wanting to do all that stuff. Like I always wanted to be a performer. But yeah, and like that was real like I mean, I guess I did gymnastics, but gymnastics is still like, and it's still like you perform your routine and like everyone's watching you. It's still a performance. Like,
yeah,
I did rhythmic gymnastics at one point as well, where it has all the ribbons and the balls and it was very intense. But like everything like that. Like I guess like I did ice skating as well, which figure skating, which again, it's a sport, but it's a performance. Like, yeah. So like, I wasn't into like rugby or soccer or I don't know, cricket or anything like that. But I was always like, I needed to perform. I was always a performer, which I get horrible stage fright, so it doesn't make sense. But
yeah, that definitely is kind of ironic.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of performing, one of the things that I thought was really cool when I was listening to your podcast is you were on Australia's Got Talent. Like, it's not by the look on your face that this is a really good story. So if you care to share it.
It was so that came about because the person that I was doing, so this is literally 10 years ago now because it was 2011. So just for like the idea of what was happening. So there was this guy that sometimes would wrestle in a dress, and he would wrestle, his name's Crackerjack, and he'd wrestle as Cracker Jill, which was Crackerjack's sister, but it was very obviously just him in a dress, like very like Santina Morella. Yeah. So the people that do like Australian Idol and stuff, they have like producers that go out and try and find acts, and somehow someone found him and was like, this is great, we want this, like you wrestling a girl, like this is hilarious. And so we went through the whole process of doing it, and like before we did it, we were like you understand that this is like a guy and I'm a girl and we're going to be wrestling on TV, like this is primetime TV. Like, do you understand what's going to happen? They're like, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's hilarious. Like, he's in a dress. And I was like, I don't think this is going to go down how you think this is going to go down, producers, but okay. And needless to say, we got out there, everyone's laughing, everyone's ha, 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 ha. And then the second he like forearmed me, the crowd just go, oh. And then it was just like this awkward, like, oh no, oh. And then, so then when it actually aired on TV, it was clipped down to, it was only things of me hitting him. Like it was me doing a runner on him, me doing a crossbody on him, me hitting him with a pan or a handbag. Like it was all like, they just cut out anything that had him getting any offense on me, because obviously a primetime crowd, especially going to watch a talent show, did not want to see this jacked up grizzly man with long hair and a long beard. Like he's covered in scars. He's like a deathmatch wrestler when he's not in his dress. Like they didn't want to see that guy beat up this sweet little innocent blonde girl. And so we were right in the end. But hey, got on TV, so it is what it is.
That's amazing. Like when I heard you tell that story, I was dying. And even now, like I hear, just slightly different details, obviously, from when you said it on your podcast, because you're doing like a more condensed story, but it's pretty hilarious just because like you told them in advance, like, are you sure it's okay? And they're like, oh yeah, no worries.
It's hilarious. That's be fine. He's in a dress. Like, no, that's not gonna be fine. I just, come on, guys.
Yeah, just because a man has on a dress, I mean, he's obviously a man, does not make a man hitting a woman television worthy.
Yes, exactly. Like it's not the same as like intergender wrestling, when you like you show both competitors as like equal athletes, and like it's a very different presentation to hilarious guy on TV in a dress and girl wrestling for 2 minutes. Like it's a very different like reaction.
Now, when the producers came to you guys, was it meant to be more of a comedy spot, or was it meant to really show off like the athleticism of both of you?
Oh no, it's supposed to be a comedy spot.
Okay.
We did like, it was a comedy match that we did. Like we did it was very like, I don't know, like I hit him in the groin and like funny things like it was very like, boy, girl, like your generic, what you would have seen, I guess, in intergender wrestling 10 years ago, where it was like the girl as the weaker component and like trying to get up on the guy, and then the hilarious things would happen at the end and everything like that. And yeah, it was meant to be like funny, but it was just like, as soon as he did anything to like get heat on me, like it was just like he was going to get real heat, because the real world is not prepared for that.
Definitely, especially if they're not a wrestling crowd per se. Like, I mean, if you're in front of like a crowd and they understand what's going on, what the storyline is here building into it. But if you're just on like a talent show showing them this kind of stuff, I mean,
yeah,
they're not
they
necessarily in on the
yeah.
gag.
Exactly. Like they think, holy crap, that guy is just beating up that girl. Like they know wrestling's fake,
Right.
but as soon as they see it in real life, they're like, well, that was real. And I was like,
That's what
you
I
can't
love.
win.
That's what I love about people too, when they say that wrestling's fake, but they get up in arms about something that happens within wrestling. I'm like, best of both worlds here. Let's go. Like I always say, like, you guys like watch movies and all of that kind of stuff, and those people are trained actors on wires. We are trained wrestlers without wires. Like it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing. We're just doing a live performance, and your movies, if they botch, they get to redo it.
Yeah,
they get a second take.
Yeah, we don't get that liberty in wrestling.
Nope.
Well, maybe some do now with obviously the pandemic. They can, okay, that wasn't live, we'll just reshoot that real fast and whatever. But you know, normal, what we call
normal wrestling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like if you're in front of an independent crowd, there's no redos.
Nope. And they'll make sure you know if you've done something wrong. Whoa.
If the crowd doesn't let you know, Botchamania certainly will.
Thanks, Matthew.
Well, let's talk more, because you were obviously already pro wrestling at that time. You knew what you were doing. You were all over the Australian independents. Within a year after that, though, you were debuting in the US at many different companies, including the one where I met you at, which I don't know if you recall that weekend.
Yeah.
You remember that was my birthday weekend?
Yeah, I remember meeting you. I remember it was a crazy weekend.
Yeah, that weekend, I apologize to everybody who was at the hotel that we stayed at that weekend, because after the Sunday taping, which Sunday of that weekend was my actual birthday, I got nice and hammered at the after party, which is cool. It's my birthday, right?
It's what you do. Yeah.
Yeah. But I know my limit, and I was at my limit. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going back to the hotel and I'm going to bed and everything's going to be great. No. Because when we got back to the hotel, like to go to the elevator over here to our left, and like right in front and right to the right of that is like this little area where everybody was like hanging out. And I can't remember who all was in that room at that time. But I just remember I walk in, and some of the Japanese girls that happened to be in town that weekend were in that room with Dave Prazak. And I can't remember really anybody else at that time, because like I said, I was really hammered. But they were like, birthday chug. And I was like, no. So everybody's going, chug, chug, chug. And I don't know what time of night it was at that point, but I was like, all right, one, and I got to go. And I'm not... At that point, I didn't have anything bubbly in my system. So they had, I don't know if it was champagne or sparkling wine or what it was, but I chugged it and I was like, oh man, I got to go. And they're like, no, one more. And I was like, peer pressure. And so
they'll do that to you.
Having a bad experience in the elevator that evening and shutting down the elevator for the next day. So I apologize to all the Shimmer girls about that. But
it happens.
That was that weekend.
It happens. A lot of crazy things happened in that little like annex room down at the Shimmer Hotel. Like kids these days, they don't know. They don't know anymore. There's no Shimmer after party anymore. There's no like, everyone flies out on Sunday night, so they don't know what it was like in that Shimmer Hotel. The chaos.
If those walls talk. Like that whole hotel, if those walls could talk, there are some crazy stories. Like I won't say names, but like I remember one time I was going down the stairwell and there just happened to be one of the girls getting spray tanned in the stairwell. So she's just standing there butt naked and they're spraying her down like in the middle of the hotel stairwell. Yep. It's like those
sounds
walls
right.
talk.
Yes.
Now, I remember we were actually supposed to wrestle like maybe a year or two later on Shimmer, but then like last second it got taken away and I was so devastated.
It was so chaos.
Oh. I want to
Like
wrestle
we had
Shazza.
the whole thing planned.
Yeah.
Like we had the whole thing planned, and then they're like, change your minds. This is what's happening instead. And then I think that was when I was very relatively new to Shimmer, and I'd never really like had to work so like changed up on me so quickly, and I was just like in panic mode because it was like, yep, so your match has changed, now you're wrestling this person in 3 matches time, and I'm like, what do you mean? Panic, like I've just planned, like I have got this, can I not do this? What's wrong with this?
I was feeling the same way. I was so devastated because like when you first came in, we became friends, and I was like, oh man, I was like, I want to wrestle Shazza. Because one of my best matches I ever had at Shimmer was actually with Madison Eagles. I loved my match there. And I was like, okay, another Australian, I got to get my hands on this one. And it just got.
We're not all like Madison. We're not all like Madison. She is. No. She's. When I sent my like demo reel to Dave for Shimmer, I think I had like a match with Madison on there, and he just replied back and he was like, I'm not even watching that because that's cheating. And I was like, damn it, it's a really good match though. And he's like, I know it would be because it's Madison. Of course it's a really good match. Like she makes it. I was like, damn it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my match with her, like, holy cow. I was like, I didn't know I could do half the things that I did. And I was the heel. I was technically the aggressor, and she's like 3 feet taller than me. So it was crazy.
Yeah.
And, like crazy. Just talented.
She's so talented.
So like so talented. I think the same when I watch your matches. Like I don't think I've seen a bad Shazza match.
Oh, there's plenty. there's plenty.
Well then, I will take your word on that. I'm not going to argue with you if you say that, but I have not seen a bad Shazza match.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I mean, as you kept coming over to the States, you came, how many times have you lost count now?
Yeah, I remember in 2018, the first trip I did in 2018 was like my 10th trip, because I remember being like 10th time, and it was the first time I stayed in Chicago for like 2 extra days. So I was like, okay, I've been here 10 times. It's time to actually see Chicago, like other than the Shimmer Hotel. And then since then I'd been like another like 6 or 7 times, like in the last like 2 years. Well, not the last year. Obviously. Actually, yeah. So
the last year, I actually want to talk to you about that, because I mean, literally, it'll be a year and a couple weeks now. You flew to the United States to go on your next, US tour of what you were doing. And as you were on the plane in the air with no Wi-Fi, anything to like connect to the world completely changed. How was that for you?
So it's actually, as we record this, I know this will date the podcast, it's actually a year ago today that I got on the plane. Yeah. It's got all my memories today. I was like, yay, thanks Time Hop, thanks Facebook memories, love that. It was crazy. Like, for when I first got off the plane and like started hearing and seeing what was happening, it was kind of like a weird like state of denial. So like I stayed in America. I flew in on the Thursday and I flew out on the Monday or the Tuesday after. Like that was the period of time that it took me to decide that I had to go home. So I flew in on the Thursday. The Friday, everything was kind of like a bit weird, but like everything was kind of happening, but it was like everyone, they was talking about this 2-week lockdown, and it was like, okay, it's just 2 weeks, like it'll be fine. And so I had this fear of like, if the lockdown was only 2 weeks, because that's what they were telling us at the time. They were like, we're just going to lock everyone down for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks that'll like sort it all out and we'll go back to normal. And it was like, if this lockdown is only 2 weeks and I fly home and then everything else that I had planned just goes on as planned, then I've gone home for no reason. And my country is locking us in the country, so I can't get back out if I go home. But like, I'm very thankful that I did go home, because I otherwise would have been much worse. but yeah, it was like, it took me a while to like that, like I got there and was kind of like, okay. And then I had like a show. I got 2 shows done while I was there on the Saturday and the Sunday. And by the time I finished the Sunday show, it was like every other show I had booked for like the next like 3 weeks had been cancelled. And I was like, okay, time to go home. Like I was like, that night, I like, as I was driving home from that show, I was like rescheduling my flights and figuring it all out, because I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life and trying to figure it all out. And then I came home, and then I had to quarantine for 2 weeks. And then we had a lockdown for like 3 months here. I just stayed at home for literally 3 months and didn't have a job and didn't have anything to do. And then now it's kind of normal.
Wow.
But it was wild. Like, yeah, like a year ago, like the year, it's so crazy that so much has happened in a year, like that we've gone from like this complete lockdown and shutdown to where we are now here in Australia, where like I feel comfortable moving around and going around, and we like have shows starting back up with like real crowds, and like they're still at, I think, like 50% capacity of like the actual venue sizes, but like it's still like couple of hundred people. Like it's not like you walk out and you're like, this place is empty. You're like, you walk out and you're, this is a decent sized crowd. Like this is okay. Like this isn't nothing. So it's just a strange adventure I've been on.
When you go and you have these crowds, are they socially distanced or wearing masks or anything at all like that?
No, they yeah, like, so the only place that masks are like legally required are in on public transport, like your buses and trains and stuff like that. But we haven't had any community transmission of COVID for, I think it's about 50 something days at the moment. So like we have cases, but they're all in hotel quarantine. So anyone that flies into the country is locked in a hotel for 14 days and like completely isolated and everything like that. We had a couple of breaches from like hotel quarantine where like the cleaners from the hotel quarantine got COVID and then like went to, I don't know, the bottle shop, and then like there was like small little clusters like that. And so anytime anything like that happens, things kind of shut down again. Well, not shut down, but like we get a bit more stricter with our rules. Like the goal is to keep businesses open and never have to lock us all down again. And now we've got the vaccine rolling out. So most of the frontline like quarantine hotel workers and stuff have been like starting their vaccines and stuff. So they don't have to worry about COVID spreading out of the hotels. It's crazy. Like we have the only rule that they have when we're in like a live event is that there's no dancing, so they have to stay, like the rule, like the legal term is no dancing, but it's basically that they have to stay seated. So they can get up and be like, yeah, but then they have to get straight back down. Like they're not allowed to like walk around the venue lots and stuff. Like once you're in your seat, you're in your seat. But you can scream and shout and do whatever you want from your seat. You just can't like jump around and go,
wow,
like that.
Such a difference. Like, just like, and you guys sound so organized. Like, I live in Canada, and I would like to say that we're pretty conservative on the side of certain things with COVID, and like, but we still have a curfew until 8 p.m. or from 8 p.m. till I think it's like 5 a.m. I don't know. I'm not up that early enough to be outside anyway. But like, it's crazy to me to like think that there's somewhere in the world where things are getting back to normal. And like for me, like when I'm in Quebec and they're like, okay, things are starting to get serious, so we're gonna lock you guys down like a little bit more with different rules. And I'm like, but we're nothing like the States, and you know, they're opening. To me, it's going too far, but you know, to my family and friends that live in the States, you know, they're like, oh, no mask mandates anymore. And I'm like, are you guys kidding me?
Yeah, that's wild.
Your numbers are still sky high. Like, what is your problem?
Yeah, we get like, if like the last time there was like a lockdowny kind of thing, like one of our state, because we have a lot of state borders as well. So like I haven't left I haven't left Sydney. I left Sydney once for a wedding, and I drove like 2 hours out of Sydney. That's the furthest I've traveled in the past year. But like we have like, we've had state borders have been closed, so we haven't been able to like travel interstate a lot. So like Melbourne, which is in Victoria, they got locked down I don't know, a couple of weeks ago now, because there was like 3 cases that had come out of like the hotel quarantine, and so like they went into like a strict lockdown for 3 days though, but then after those 3 days they just went back to normal. So it was like a shock for them for 3 days, but it nipped everything in the bud, and then they could go on with life. And like we had a breakout in Sydney over Christmas, which meant that we couldn't, like my in-laws all live interstate, and I hadn't seen them for like over a year. Because we haven't been able to travel. And so like I was supposed to go to Melbourne for Christmas, and then we couldn't go, like that all got cancelled because COVID. So like it's hard. I've had booking, like I had like the start of the year, I was supposed to travel to Melbourne for a show in January, and then we got locked down and blocked out of Melbourne like a week or 2 before it. And so it's like, it's a point where like, it's fine. Like our day-to-day life is fine. Like I can go to work, and I can go to the grocery store, and I can go to the gym, and like I don't have to like stress about day-to-day life. But like the things that I want to do, where I want to like travel around, like even now I have like a show booked in April, so in a couple of weeks, in an interstate, and like I think it's going to happen, but like I never want to get too excited because I don't know. Like I don't, like I was crushed when my last trip interstate got cancelled for like wrestling. I was like, finally I'm wrestling outside of Sydney, like different crowd or whatever, like, and it just like it crushes you. So I'm just kind of like, every show I'm like, this is cool, but also it can be taken away from us at any time, because like this is like, if they're going to shut down anything, they're going to shut down like people getting sweaty and yelling at each other in a wrestling ring in a small room with lots of people, like, and that's completely fair. Yeah, I understand. Sure. So, but yeah, so I try not to get like too connected to like things that I'm doing, but like also I get very excited at the same time. So it's hard. It's just like, it's like even just like the little bit of like I've only wrestled, it's where like a couple months into the year, I've wrestled once this year, but like, and so like every match that I do just means so much more, because it's like I have like a month to think about this one thing that I'm going to do, as opposed to like when you're doing lots of things and you kind of like just like, okay, but like these are the things that I do, and so you know these things, and like everything's chaos, and you get into the show halfway through the show and everyone's leaving here and there, whatever. So that's nice, like, but it's just so completely different to like think about one match for like a month instead of thinking about 500 different matches and what could happen and then just figuring it out there.
Yeah, well, it makes you really count your blessings and certain things that you get to do, for sure. Like, it's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But let's talk more about your wrestling career, because obviously we don't want to talk about COVID the whole time and the differences between Australia and what's going on the Western part. Now, one of those trips when you came over to the States, I mean, many of them, but one of them that I want to talk about is NXT, when you were versus Emma. And it was so cool because NXT, they put over on commentary that this was a rematch that Emma was having from her last match that she had in Australia. So how cool is that for you?
That was like the coolest moment of my life. Like, I will be forever indebted to Tennille for like that opportunity. Like, I don't know how, like, from my understanding, they kind of said, like, what happened was we were at Lexi's for customs before Shimmer, and we were going to, we were going to go to the NXT taping the next day, because it was the first time that like Billy and Peyton we'd been over since they'd been signed. So we were like, oh, we'll go watch our friends wrestle. Like, that's real cool. And so the day before we were going, Lexi pulled me aside and was like, oh, they want you at the show tomorrow at 1 p.m. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, this makes no sense. And she's like, WWE want you there. And I was like, what are you saying? Like, it was just so far from my mind. Like, you always imagine that if you're going to get this opportunity, you're going to like train real hard and you're going to be in like the best shape that you ever could be in. And like, you're going to put your best foot forward. But like, I was eating donuts for breakfast. Like, I was like, I'm on holidays, bitches. Like, what? Like, I was just so like not mentally prepared for that opportunity. And like, also the idea of wrestling for WWE was so far from my, like, it's not like it is now where they hire a lot of girls from the independents. Whereas like this was still very much like, this was before they hired like Heidi Lovelace and Evie and Kimberly and like, or like before they did their big like indie hire. So the idea of wrestling for WWE, I was kind of like, no, like I don't think that's ever really in my like forte. Like, I'm just happy wrestling and like telling stories and doing what I do. Like, that was just not a thought. So it was all just very overwhelming. But like what I believe happened was someone asked Lexi for like someone at WWE, because I think maybe Billy and Peyton had pointed out that there was going to be a bunch of internationals at Lexi's house that weekend. And so someone had asked Lexi for a list of who was at her house. And I believe Tennille was like, look, if Shazza's there, I would really like to wrestle Shazza, because it was when she just turned into evil Emma. Like, she'd stopped being Dancy Emma, whatever. So
I love that.
Yeah. So she wanted to wrestle me, because then it could be like this story of how she's changed as a performer. And like, so that's why they put it, like, we told them about it for commentary and stuff, and they put it over in commentary and stuff, because I think, and that was a story she wanted to portray. And like, I'll forever be indebted to Tennille, because like, I just, like, that was just never on my mind or my thoughts, that and like any of that was just so far from what I imagined I could do. But then once I did it, I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. and then it just became like tunnel vision for the next, I don't know, like 5-6 years. It's just been like, I can be a wrestler like full time. Like, I can do this. I can be on TV. Like, I'm good enough. Well, like, lots of I'm not good enough, but then lots of yes, I am good enough, and like you are that sort of thing. Like that sort of mental game that you play with each other, play with yourself. But that sort of was like the catalyst for me ever even attempting to, I don't know, be a signed wrestler in any capacity.
Well, I mean, it worked out. That match must have worked out well for you with WWE, because I mean, just a couple of years later, you were back and you were wrestling Kairi Sane on NXT as well. How was that experience for you? Was it different? Because did you have more time to prepare?
That one I had a bit more time to prepare. So in between, so after the Tennille match, I kind of kept in contact with WWE and was very like, here's my stuff. Here's my stuff. What's going on? Here's my stuff. One of those people. And in that time between then, they had a tryout in Australia, which I did. It was the one that Rhea Ripley was signed from. So I always make this joke that every person that I've ever wrestled in front of talent relations has a contract, because I wrestled Rhea at the tryout, and then a year or two later, I wrestled Indy Hartwell in front when they were like down watching one of our shows. So it's like this ongoing joke. But then the last time they were down there, no one from my match got signed. So I was like, okay, guys, sorry, I've lost my touch.
Good luck, Chuck, there for a while.
Yeah. But yeah, so like that was kind of, I kept in contact. I had a tryout, then they were looking for girls for the first Mae Young Classic. And there was kind of talk about maybe being in it, maybe being an alternate, that's the word. And then that sort of kind of all fell through, which understandably, because they had Rhea and they had Tony, like they don't need a third blonde Australian, like especially when I'm like 10 years older than both of them. So like I was like, yeah, that's fine. But I still like kept in contact and like kept pushing for things. And I think that one, the one when I did wrestled Kairi Sane, I didn't know, like I was over for like a Shimmer Mania trip or whatever, and I just told them like, hey, I'm in the States at this point in time, and then they were like, oh yeah, like come down. And I was like, cool, I will come down. But it's still like, you don't know what you're doing until you get there. Like, you don't know if you're just going to sit around and hang out or whatever. And then it's like, they came out of their production meeting and they're like, yeah, so it's you and Curry staying tonight. And I was like, what? Okay, cool. Like, yes, sure. No worries, I'll do that. So that was really fun. It was really fun planning the match with her, because it was supposed to be a squash match. It was a squash match. So planning it with her, and I don't think she'd had many squash matches at that point in time. So she'd be like, oh, I do this. And then I'd be like, cool. And she'd be like, but then you, and I'd be like, no, like, not me. Like, I don't do anything, all you. Like, I'm not part of this. I'm just here for you. And she's like, oh, but surely you get something. And I was like, no, that's all you. You get it all, not me.
Oh, well, you haven't just had opportunities with WWE either, because you've also had opportunities with AEW, did AEW Dark, you did the Casino Battle Royal. And I just have a question, because the picture where you're in the split doing your pose and Britt Baker is super kicking you across the face, was that planned, or is that just a lucky meme that came out of it?
So that happened. So at the time when that Casino Battle Royale happened, so I do the pose, whatever. That's like what I've always done as my entrance. And Kylie Rae does a very similar pose. And she was signed by AEW. And at that time, she hadn't been seen for a while, and no one really knew what was happening with her. So I remember specifically when I was going to stun a Swole, and then Britt was going to super kick me. But I remember specifically sitting there in the splits and being like, but I'm not going to do my pose, because I don't know what's happening with Kylie Rae, and I don't want to do anything that would remind anyone of Kylie Rae. Like, I don't want to get hate for, like, you get hate for stupid reasons in wrestling. Oh, yeah. So I was just like, oh no, don't do it. And I could it was like happening in slow motion in my mind as I was doing it. And I was just like, oh no, it's happening. Oh no. Oh fuck, I've done it. Oh crap, I am here. I was like, don't do it. Oh no, crap. And then super kick happened. And it was just a very lucky that James got such a good shot at it. But yeah, like, I remember specifically was like, don't do the pose. Like, just land in the splits and then get super kick. Do not do your pose. Do not do it. Oh crap.
But that picture of Britt like super kicking you in the face, it was everywhere, and still every once in a while it pops up pretty frequently. So that's pretty epic.
Yeah, becoming a meme is probably like a good life goal tick. Like, can tick that one off the bucket list.
Amazing. And I know, like, you were in contact with them because, like I said, you had the AEW Dark match where you tagged against Leva Bates and Nyla Rose, which, that had to have been amazing, being able to, Nyla is like their biggest heel besides Britt Baker.
Yes. It was like, when that came about, that was like another thing of me just being like, oh, hey, like, I'm going to be in the country. And then they were like, oh yeah, let's see. And then like half an hour later being like, oh, okay, yeah, like, we'll use you on this date. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, we'll get back to you with your flight information. I was like, what do you mean? Like, you're literally the second biggest company in the world. Don't you have to have like a debate, like a sit down, like pros and cons of whether or not Shazza is worth having on our show? Like, and it was just like, oh no, like, you're fine. Like, we liked you, having you around. If you're in the States, like, that's fine. That's easy. Like, of course we'll use you. Because like, it's a lot different for me, I guess, as an international, and like, because there's so much like immigration and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's not as simple as like, if I lived in America, like, being able to be like, oh, like, we can just use her at any time. So like, I always, like, when I'm in town, I'm like, let me show you what I can do. So it's just, it's strange, and it was wild. It was such a crazy, like, I remember like feeling really depressed about the, like I didn't watch it for a whole year. I only watched it like a year ago, or like when it was like a year like up of it happening. What? Because there was like, I don't know what happened in my mind. I'd like ruined like, I was calling my husband at like 2. It would have been fine for him. It would have been like afternoon for him, but it was like 2 a.m. for me. And I was like, I've ruined everything. But I just thought I did so bad in this match. Like, I don't even know. Like no one was like, hey, you did really bad. It was just like in my head, I'd done horrible. And I was just like this distraught mess. Because that's what, like in wrestling, you just think that you've ruined everything all the time because of course. So it was a roller coaster. But then by the time by the time I got home from America, like while I was on my plane on my way home, this like hashtag campaign for like hashtag sign Shazza started. So then it was like this whole other like roller coaster of emotions, because then I was getting like everyone like tweeting it hashtag sign Shazza, and like Nyla tweeted it and Joey Janela tweeted it and Brandy responded to it and she said like, yes, like I love her, I want her. It was like when she was doing the hair thing, she was like, you know, her hair's really pretty or something, like I want her hair, and like said something like that. And I was like this real like crazy, I don't know, just emotions. That whole experience, life is emotion. Wrestling is emotional. And
It is.
No one talks about the absolute just roller coaster of like highs to lows that you go through.
In my opinion, I say sign Shazza. We should get that as a hashtag again, because I would love to see you on my TV weekly or bi-weekly or however the situation goes.
Once a month,
sign with.
That's fine. I'm fine. Whatever. Like once every 2 months. Like I'm cool, guys. Like that's fine. Just maybe like just on a poster is enough for me. Like that's really.
So if COVID went away and you were allowed to leave Australia, you got signed to one of these major companies, say Impact or AEW or WWE or Ring of Honor, or any of these big companies on TV, are you prepared to leave Australia and just live out your dream over here?
100%.
What about your
like, we'll figure it out. Yeah, no. Like he's always like, since it became like my goal, it was always like, it's always been understood. Like as long as I'm not like moving overseas to be poor, like, yeah, like if I was moving overseas to be a struggling independent artist, I don't know, he would be that supportive. He'd be like, excuse me, we have bills to pay and I'm not going to pay all of them. But like, as long as I was moving overseas to chase my dreams and was making enough to survive, not to support both of us, like he works, he's fine, like, but like making enough to pay my half of life, it would be like, yeah, 100%, like we'd figure it out. He'd move over or whatever, we'd figure it out. It'd be fine. Like it's always been completely, yeah, like he always, when I was having my WWE tryout, like a month or two before it, he was like, okay, we sat down and he was like, okay, what is everything that we need to do to get you prepared for this? And like is just 100% like on board, most supportive human in the entire world.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah. I'm very lucky.
Because I know when I personally had some WWE extra work and stuff like that, my husband was really super supportive too. But like, it's never, okay, we're going to upend our whole lives and move to, well, we would move to another country now because we're in Canada. Yeah. But it's not across the world, you know, it's just a couple hours. Well, literally from where I am, it's like an hour drive to the US border. So it's like not big of a deal, you know?
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. I'm glad that he's so supportive. And is he still wrestling?
Yeah, he's still wrestling. So we instead of having a honeymoon when we got married, because like he's again the most supportive husband in the world, I said, hey, instead of using all this money for like a nice fancy honeymoon, can I just quit my job and we just go to America for 3 months so I can wrestle? And he was like, he wasn't like sure. He was like, this is a really dumb thing to do with all of our money, but okay. So he came to me. We both went to America in like March, April 2019. We were there for 3 months in 2019. And he was coming as well to like train and wrestle and stuff. And about 2 weeks into it, he dislocated his elbow. And it's like it was a very bad injury. Like, and then we were also stuck in America where you can't get anything done to like fix it. So we were just kind of he like it didn't heal right because we were there. But he like stayed, he stayed with me while I was there, like so I could travel around and do everything that I had to do to get my name out there and create the brand and the awareness and get the experience and exposure and all the things that come with being a wrestler.
Yeah.
He stuck by all that. And then so finally, well, he was back to being okay to wrestle, like medically cleared to wrestle again by like March last year, but then COVID happened.
The dreaded
so
COVID.
now he's kind of been back at wrestling since like October-ish last year. But like he's still young. He's really good. He's young. Like if he ever turned to me and said, I want to be a signed professional wrestler, I would do absolutely everything I could to encourage him and to support him and to let him live his dream as well.
I love that. That is like the best couple thing ever. Like obviously I have the same support, but to hear it come from someone else, like that's amazing that there's so many couples that are that supportive of one another and can push each other towards each other's own dreams, whatever that may be.
Yeah, exactly. Like
my couple and your couple is wrestling.
Yes, exactly. Like we're both very honest with each other in like supporting each other. Like we'll tell each other if like we do something and it's kind of shit, or like, you know, like there has to be that like honesty, because if we're ever going to uproot our entire lives for this dream, then we have to know that 100% has been put into it. Like otherwise we like, because uprooting our lives to be a failure, not to be a failure, but like for not the best reason ever would be silly. So as long as I'm always putting in 100%, as long as he's always putting in 100%, we're supportive. And if we ever drop below 100%, we call each other out on that shit and go, oi, you slept in, you didn't go to the gym, sort your shit out.
Hey, that's the best that I've heard. And Shazza, it's been so great talking to you. I love that we got to catch up. I'd love to do it again soon.
Yes.
It's been
years.
Like everybody else that I talk to, it's been years.
Yes.
And I love getting to talk to everybody. So before we go, make sure to put over your podcast and all your social media.
Yes, so I have a podcast. It's called That's So Shazza. If you just search that, I'm sure it'll come up. And then I have all my social media is at Shazza_McKenzie is Twitter and Instagram. And the best way to support me is my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Shazza McKenzie. There's like the video version of the podcast goes there, and like photos, and I don't know, I do live streams. I don't know, I do some stuff. It's exciting. It's cool. I think people like it. I don't know.
Well, obviously people like it if they keep subscribing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Shazza, this has been awesome. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Hey guys, help me welcome back pro wrestling historian, and of course, our monthly history lesson is with him every month, Dan Murphy. Hey, Dan.
Hey, thanks for having me back for yet another month. This is a new, every time I appear, it's a new record. You know, I'm making another appearance, so it's extending the record. So thanks for having me.
Besides myself, I mean, you're the most appearing guest on the show.
Wow, look at that. That's pretty impressive in a weird way. Well, thank you.
Well, how are you doing? I know your book's coming out next month. Of course, we got the plaque still behind you there.
Yeah, back over here. It is The Wrestlers. It's the Masters of the Craft of Professional Wrestling. Very excited about it. Co-wrote it with a guy named Brian Young out of Buffalo, where I'm from. And we spent about a year and a half putting it together. Basically, your favorite wrestlers, interviewed a bunch of people and really had them talk about the people that they enjoy working the most, why they like working them. It's really about the art of pro wrestling. It's not about necessarily the guys or girls who have won the most titles, the ones who have done a variety of things. It's the ones who are just really solid workers, regardless of where they're pushed and promoted. And it's kind of celebrating those people. So I think it's a book that real wrestling fans are really going to like, and I'm very excited that it's finally coming out.
Well, I saw just a bit ago you posted like just some of the names of people that you interviewed for the book, and I was like, holy cow, that's a lot of great names just on the people you interviewed, talking about who their favorite wrestlers are.
Thank you. Yeah, we tried our hardest. Really reached out from everybody, from guys like Terry Funk, You know, older guys like that, Paul Orndorff, Terry Funk, and things like that. We talked to Jim Ross, Brody Lee, who obviously had just recently passed away, Buddy Colt, another older veteran who just passed away last week as well as we're recording this. And that was something that Brian and I really set out to do. When we came up with the idea of doing the book, I had the idea of doing a book on wrestlers, and kind of the carpenters and the people who build wrestling. Brian had this idea of doing a book where you talk to all the old timers and get as many stories as you can before they're gone, because people, they you know, they're gone. Their stories, all that history leaves. And we kind of combined those two ideas and had the wrestlers not talk about themselves or not talk about the stories that they always tell, but talk about their memories of being in the ring with other people. And because those are memories that will often, like, you know, go away. And that's really how the book came apart, came together. So yeah, I talked to about 45, 46 different people and really kind of picked their brain across different generations. And again, really happy with how it came out.
Oh, I'm so excited next month. I can't wait to order it and get it and have it and read it and have all these new stories that I get to you know, relive through the person's own story, you know.
Well, I'll tell you what, right now, I'm going to actually talk about one of those stories. I want to talk about two
Awesome.
real quick. See, there's a segue.
I
So,
love
okay, two people I'd like to talk about, and I'm going to refer to some notes here. Normally, I kind of do this off the top of my head, but these are people that I really admire, and they're criminally underappreciated in wrestling, and I want to make sure that I have everything. So if my eyes aren't always right on the camera, I'm just reading a little bit. But
no
number
worries.
one, somebody I talk a little bit about in Sisterhood of the Squared Circle, which you can also kind of see up on the wall from a book signing I did for that book. Cora Livingston. Now, Cora Livingston, not not as well known. She's still not in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, even though she's been nominated and on the list for years. It's kind of a crime that she's not. Uh, Believed to have been born in Buffalo, New York, anytime between 1886 and 1893. Records are really kind of all over the place with her. She was an athlete. She competed in track and field and got into wrestling, started competing in wrestling in carnivals and circuses at the age of 16. Now, for this month, the month of March, this is significant because in March of 1906, she wrestled 3 matches against Hazel Parker. Now, Cora Livingston, she was billed as 110 pounds, the champion featherweight of Buffalo. She was facing this Hazel Parker, 110 pounds, champion featherweight of the United States. They were going to do a best of 3 falls series, and the winner would be known as the Women's World Wrestling Champion, which would be essentially the first recognized Women's World Championship. So in March of 1906, the first fall, let's see here. Okay, yeah. So it was hyped in the newspaper that they would have the 3 matches, and it's reported both women are clever wrestlers and hold records. Parker won the first match on March 19th. Cora Livingston won the second match the next night on March 20th. And on March 23rd, Cora Livingston won the third and deciding bout. From that point forward, she was billed as Women's World Champion. So she went on. She ended up kind of competing throughout the United States, wrestled the British and Canadian women's champions, married Paul Bowser, who during that era, up until the 40s or so, was probably the top wrestling promoter in the United States based out of Boston. So she was very, very prominent working with him, although by that point she had kind of segued out of wrestling. And she was referred to by wrestling historian Nat Fleischer as, quote, Cora was recognized everywhere as the greatest female wrestler in the world. And what was really cool about her is she ended up getting women's matches booked on the same events as the men, taking it off of the carnival sideshow circuit and out of the circuses and putting on the same show as men. She ended up defending her championship in Illinois, Massachusetts, Ohio, North Carolina, Quebec, and was billed as the Gotchess of the mat, as reference to Frank Gotch. So really, she was an absolute pioneer of women's pro wrestling, criminally underknown, but had an incredible career early in the 20th century.
Beautiful. I love it.
Yes. Now, and speaking of beautiful, she was beautiful too, and that's the thing. There's a great quote here actually that I didn't mention, but where was it? Okay, in a book by this writer L.A. Jennings, a book's called "She's a Knockout." Quote was, At the time that Livingston earned the right to declare herself the female champion wrestler of the world, the American press was displeased with female wrestlers because, up until the early 1900s, there had never been a particularly skilled one. This was perhaps because most of the women billed as wrestlers were either actresses pretending to be competent fighters or untrained women looking to fill a particular niche. Cora was actually a great wrestler, legitimately good and good at the showmanship aspect of pro wrestling, but she was also a very attractive woman in the traditional sense. So in a lot of ways, she was really the first, if you want to say diva, if you want to say knockout, she was the first very attractive woman that would become a championship wrestler, setting the stage for Mildred Burke and all of the women wrestlers that would follow afterwards.
And I bet so many of those women, well, I mean, Mildred Burke, obviously more in that time zone or time frame of life, but I'm sure like a lot of the women now probably don't even have any clue.
That's exactly it. And again, Google Cora Livingston. You'll find a lot. There's not a lot online. There are a few things if you dig enough, but she really does deserve some credit for her contributions to women's pro wrestling. The second person, again, dealing with the month of March. The second person I like to talk about is actually a guy, and he is written about in the Wrestlers. This is the man that Lou Thez handpicked to defeat him for the NWA World Title in March of 1956. Except the federal government wouldn't let the match happen. And the reason,
man.
yeah, it's George Gordienko. George Gordienko is a native of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Met Lou Thez when Lou Thez was up working for the Stampede promotion in Calgary. They did a 60-minute draw. Lou Thez wrote about it. We once worked a 60-minute draw, and I couldn't run him out of gas, which almost never happened. And Thez was known for being able to outwork anyone.
Mhm.
Gordienko had better cardio than Lou Thez in Lou Thez's prime. Gordienko had trained at the local YMCA, met some promoters, met the Minnesota wrestling promoter and wrestler Wallard Carbo. They thought he'd be a good training partner for Vern Gagne, convinced him to come down to Minnesota, went to Minnesota, began wrestling, made his debut in 1946, started attending classes at the University of Minnesota, fell in love, got married, moved back to Winnipeg. Kind of beautiful story, except he had a terrible divorce. And when his wife left him, she reported him to the government, claiming that her ex-husband was a member of the Communist Party and that they had attended communist meetings of the Marxist Socialist Club while at the university. Now, this is during the McCarthy era, the Red Scare in the United States. His ex-wife and son moved back to the U.S. George Gordienko was never let back in the country.
Oh.
Now, he continued wrestling. Based in Canada, he wrestled internationally, but could never come back into the United States. So when Lou Thez was wrestling on a broken ankle, needed time off to get away and rehab and, get away from the rigors of being world champion, he went to the NWA board, the NWA president, said, George Gordienko is the best wrestler in the world. He's the guy I want to drop the belt to. And they went to the U.S. government. They wouldn't allow it to happen. State Department would not lift their ban on Gordienko, would not allow him to come back into the United States. So instead, he ended up dropping the belt in March 15th of 1956 to Whipper Billy Watson. George Gordienko ended up wrestling all the way up until, I think, 1976, I believe. Was named the top wrestler in the United Kingdom in 1963 and 1970. Competed all throughout the Middle East, Europe, Japan, Africa, the Caribbean. Billy Robinson called him the greatest wrestler of the era. And he never really got a run as world champion and is largely unknown completely in the United States.
Well, yeah, like I've had this conversation with I think it was Lufisto when I had her on. Like a lot of people in the States don't know of wrestling history outside of the States, unfortunately. And that includes Canada. Like some people just have no idea. And I mean, I can even say like other countries, like when I lived in the US, like I knew a little bit about Japan. I knew a little bit about, Great Britain over there, the UK. And then of course, when I went over to the UK, I also learned a lot there. But like everything is so US based as far as like wrestling history is concerned that like sometimes the crazy, amazing people and stories and history outside of the US is just like non-existent basically because nobody
it's
knows
like it never happened. It's exactly it. And imagine had George Gordienko been able to come in, it would have changed American wrestling history. He would have been the NWA champion. He took the spot that went to Whipper Billy Watson, who's still an icon in Toronto and still very well known. But Gordienko was the guy that his peers considered the best in the world, but politics prevented him from ever making it, at least in the U.S. Now, as a little interesting side note to that, Gordienko ended up having a little bit of success as a painter, and at one point actually got to meet Pablo Picasso, who it turns out was a big pro wrestling fan. So Gordienko, one of the proudest moments of his life, he talked about in articles and interviews for years later, was meeting Pablo Picasso, having a cup of tea with him, and being able to talk pro wrestling.
That's crazy. Who would have ever thought Picasso was a a wrestling fan? I mean, it
That's
just
it.
doesn't seem logical, I guess.
No, you never know. You never know
Yeah.
what people are into, and when they're not working, what they're into at home, you have no idea. But
That's
those are the kind
true.
of stories that are featured in the Wrestlers.
I love it. Even more so. I can't wait to dig into it.
Very cool.
All right, Dan, it's been awesome having you on. Can't wait to see what you have for us in the month of April.